So this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. You can repeat after me. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. Oh, there was a verse already chosen? Well, nobody told me which verse. Or maybe they did. Okay, is it on the board somewhere? Is the verse on the board? Is the verse on the board? It is. Oh, that's it there, huh? Okay. I'm not accustomed to giving Bhagavad Gita class in the Balaram Hall. It's okay, I mean, can you bring it up quickly? Technology. Okay. He's in charge of the board. Don't mind? So it is 14:1. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha param bhuya pravakṣāmi jnanam jnanamuttamam yadgyatva munaya sarve param siddhim ito gataha. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha param bhuya pravakṣāmi jnanam jnanamuttamam yadgyatva munaya sarve param siddhim ito gataha. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha param bhuya pravakṣāmi jnanam jnanamuttamam yadgyatva munaya sarve param siddhim ito gataha. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha param bhuya pravakṣāmi jnanam jnanamuttamam yadgyatva munaya sarve param siddhim ito gataha. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha param bhuya pravakṣāmi jnanam jnanamuttamam yadgyatva munaya sarve param siddhim ito gataha. Ladies, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha pravakṣāmi jnanam jnanamuttamam yadgyatva munaya sarve param siddhim ito gataha. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, param, transcendental, bhuyaha, again, pravakṣāmi, I shall speak, jnanam, of all knowledge, jnanam, knowledge, uttamam, the supreme, yat, which, gatva, knowing, munayah, the sages, sarve, all, param, transcendental, siddhim, perfection, itaha, from this world, gataha, attained. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Again, I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection." Kindly repeat after me. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Again I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection." Purport. From the 7th chapter to the end of the 12th chapter, Sri Krishna in detail reveals the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, the Lord Himself is further enlightening Arjuna. If one understands this chapter through the process of philosophical speculation, he will come to an understanding of devotional service. In the 13th chapter, it was clearly explained that by humbly developing knowledge, one may possibly be freed from material entanglement. It has also been explained that it is due to association with the modes of nature that the living entity is entangled in this material world. Now, in this chapter, the Supreme Personality explains what those modes of nature are, how they act, how they bind, and how they give liberation. The knowledge explained in this chapter is proclaimed by the Supreme Lord to be superior to the knowledge given so far in other chapters. By understanding this knowledge, various great sages attained perfection and transferred to the spiritual world. The Lord now explains the same knowledge in a better way. This knowledge is far, far superior to all other processes of knowledge thus far explained. And knowing this, many attained perfection. Thus it is expected that one who understands this 14th chapter will attain perfection. Translation again. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Again I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection." So as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, the chapter entitled The Three Modes of Material Nature will be naturally focused on explaining how these modes of material nature are working, how they influence the living entity, and how, as long as we remain in some way or other connected with any of these modes of material nature, including the mode of goodness, we will remain entangled in this material world. And of course, it is after Krishna gives this very detailed explanation of these modes of material nature that Arjuna will be asking the question, well, how to solve this problem? How to no longer be under the influence of these modes of material nature? And he is also asking, what are the symptoms of one who is no longer under the influence of the modes of material nature? So you will all have to read the entire chapter to find out what is the answer that Krishna is giving. Of course, those who are devotees for any length of time know what is the actual instruction, which is actually the essence, makes up the essence of the message of the Bhagavad Gita. And the hint is, of course, being given in this very verse as well, by words such as param, param bhuya pravakshyami. Again, although Krishna, we know, in the ninth chapter is called the most confidential knowledge. But as Krishna continues to speak and to explain to Arjuna, he reveals, Hare Krishna. Thank you. I think we can live without the fan for a few minutes. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Okay. Yeah, it's become like shanti, shanti, shanti. So the clue is given in terms of param, means transcendental. But so many people are actually transcendentalists, especially here in India. So many people are taking to the path of transcendence or spirituality. But specifically in this, at the end of this chapter, Lord Krishna will very directly reveal or explain to Arjuna that one can only ultimately, fully, completely transcend these modes of material nature by the process of bhakti yoga, because it is only that process of bhakti that helps the spirit soul, the living entity, to re-establish his connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Actually, the whole Vedic culture is arranged so as to gradually help us rise from the lower modes of nature to at least become situated in the mode of goodness. Although mode of goodness is not the perfection of life. But we could say it is the perfection of material life. In that when one is able to rise to the mode of goodness, and in Kali Yuga it's very difficult because Kalo Shudra Sambhava, everyone is born in the lower modes, everyone is being heavily influenced by the mode of ignorance. That is the characteristic of Shudra. Shudra mentality. Shudra mentality means one who is not having proper understanding, one who is one of the symptoms, one who is always complaining. So the Vedic system is that by proper cultivation of knowledge and by proper lifestyle, and here is where I want to make the connection with this essay of Gita Nagari I was mentioning a little earlier. Since not many lifted their hands when I asked the question, how many are familiar with Gita Nagari? Just very, very briefly to give a background, Srila Prabhupada in that essay, which he published in his Back to Godhead magazine in 1956, is basically presenting a model of a community of like-minded individuals. And of course, like-minded means those who are knowing about Bhagavad Gita. That's why it's called Gita Nagari. Nagari, that place, that village, that community where all the members are following the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, the teachings of Lord Krishna. And up until not so long ago, the whole of India, to a large extent, was very much living in keeping with that philosophy of Gita Nagari, in that the majority of people were living in villages. Something that we fail to understand in modern day life. There is a purpose and a reason, or we say raison d'être, of villages. It is not, as we are told in history books or other such literatures written by mundane people, people who are lacking in proper knowledge. It is not that villages existed in the past and now we have evolved and we have progressed and we no longer need to live in villages, and that villages don't really have the purpose that they used to have, which is a wrong understanding, misleading understanding. And it's something I would say extremely important for our devotees to know and to understand, how villages that were the standard up until just a few hundred years ago are meant to actually be the standard lifestyle for us as individuals and as a community to nicely, naturally, and more quickly rise from the lower modes of nature to at least the mode of goodness, and then, if we are fortunate to have a Vaishnava living in our village, we can go beyond the mode of goodness, isn't it? So village life is, anyone who has been in the Krishna consciousness movement has heard many times this expression given by our founder Acharya, simple living, high thinking, isn't it? High thinking means thinking in line with the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And simple living means learning to live in harmony with Mother Nature. Learning to live with the natural gifts of nature, which come in the form of cows and land, especially, and with the main focus of endeavoring every day by the process, especially of Sravanam, the first of the 9 processes of devotional service, considered to be the most important process as well. So by hearing on a regular basis, we can gradually raise our consciousness. I mean, Krishna consciousness is all about raising our consciousness from whatever consciousness we may have based on the law of karma. We all are born under, some of us more under the influence of the mode of ignorance, some of us more under the influence of the mode of passion or the mode of goodness. Regardless, by the hearing process, which is especially emphasized, well, not only in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srinvatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Sravana Kirtana Ridyantasto Yabhadrani Vidunoti Suritsatam. So by this process, anyone from any level of higher material consciousness or lower material consciousness can be elevated beyond material consciousness to the level of transcendental consciousness, which ultimately is meant to culminate in Krishna consciousness. That Krishna consciousness is only that level of consciousness which can fully, completely liberate us from these modes of material nature. And therefore, we as a society and as devotees need to understand how it is, because it is Krishna's plan. Whatever plan is there, given by Krishna, naturally is the best plan, is the most scientific plan as well. And therefore, our acharyas, our more recent acharyas, beginning with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur up to our present founder acharya of ISKCON, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, emphasize this aspect of simple living and high thinking, and this is very much nicely presented in this essay of Gita Nagari. I very much encourage the devotees to actually, it's not available in a printed form, it's not been printed as a book as such, but it is available in the folio. And there's one particular line that comes to mind. Actually, there's a lot of very nice information in this essay. At one particular place, Srila Prabhupada explains how the perfection for living entities in the human form of life, in particular, is to understand the fatherhood of Godhead. To understand that God actually is our Father. To understand the fatherhood of God. To understand the motherhood of nature. Krishna, God is our Father. Nature, material nature, is our mother. And to understand the childhood of all living entities. We are children of God. We are dependent on God. And this particular essay of Gita Nagari is actually, time does not really allow, but there are some very unique features, and I would say unique instructions given. One of them, I'll just summarize briefly. Srila Prabhupada, as a visionary, someone who could see the future, even before leaving India and establishing his International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Srila Prabhupada clearly understood how this mission that he inherited actually from his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and which is the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how it was meant to be introduced. And therefore there are four, what Prabhupada calls movements, or four phases, which he delineates in this essay of Gita Nagari, which is also very nicely and very clearly supported in an earlier writing. It's a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote way back in 1949. We're going back quite a few decades here, 1949, when Prabhupada wrote a letter to the Deputy Prime Minister of India at the time, when Dr. Patel, delineating actually the same four, you could call it principles or phases. Prabhupada coined it as four movements. And the fourth of these movements, you will more easily identify the first three. I'll mention them now in a few seconds. But the fourth one will be a little bit elusive, but we'll try to briefly explain it. So Prabhupada explains how the mission of the Lord is meant to be introduced firstly by what he coined as the Sankirtan movement. Of course, we all know the term Sankirtan movement, and we generally think of the Sankirtan movement as, Mahaprabhu's mission, Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement. In the particular context of the essay of Gita Nagari, it specifically means the holy name and the extension of the holy name, transcendental literatures like the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, what Srila Prabhupada referred to as the Brihat Mridanga, isn't it? So this is the first of four movements that Prabhupada speaks about in this essay on Gita Nagari. I mentioned this actually because it's, at least I consider this extremely important for us to understand where this movement is meant to go. And I will try to connect it with our verse this evening. So Sankirtan movement, the first. Second movement that Prabhupada explains, second phase we could say, he coined as spiritual, deity worship movement. By chanting the holy name, especially in some unknown place, like Prabhupada did when he went to America, sitting under a tree in Thompson Square Park, he started chanting Hare Krishna. And naturally, some curious young people especially came, and after Prabhupada chanted for some time, he explained about the chanting. So this brought about the second movement, which is to establish temples where people can come to hear more about both the chanting and the philosophy behind the chanting. So Sankirtan movement, deity worship movement, where people can be introduced actually to the Archa Vigraha form of the Lord. Third movement, Prabhupada called it the spiritual initiation movement, training up individuals to become qualified to actually become part of the spiritual, transcendental family of Krishna, isn't it? To become part of officially part of the Sankirtan movement through the process of Diksha or initiation. And now I come to the fourth movement that Prabhupada speaks about, and he gave it the name classless society. And by classless society, and Prabhupada explains, he's referring to the system of Varna and Ashrama. not as it is unfortunately commonly known, where because of the absence of the divine aspect, specifically of Krishna, by classless society, Srila Prabhupada meant where individuals, regardless of which class, of which varna, or which ashram they belong to, all of them accept Krishna as the focal point and accept the process of bhakti, or devotional service, as the means by which one can attain the goal being to develop our higher consciousness, and that higher consciousness, of course, culminating in what we call Krishna prema, pure love of Krishna. So, just to reconnect with Gita Nagari, Gita Nagari is that essay which is in many ways giving us clues by which how we are meant to do this, by living together in communities. Not only, of course, that is happening in our temples, in our city temples, but the standard lifestyle, the standard location, we could say, for the vast majority of people will not be in a temple. How many people we can fit in a temple? But the vast majority of people will be living outside of our temples. And where is that ideal place where people should be living? It's village. Krishna has created the villages. Krishna has created this lifestyle where one is in contact with Mother Nature, where one is in contact with the cows, because in city life we have very little such opportunity, and we cannot so easily develop the proper understanding that we need to have and should have, and I would say must have. We must develop this consciousness of the importance of cows and the importance of self-sufficiency through village life. And of course, one may say, well, Maharaj, all we need is to chant Hare Krishna. Isn't it? Our philosophy is chant Hare Krishna and be happy. And of course, that is our philosophy, and that is not to minimize in any way the chanting of the holy name. But this chanting of the holy name, to get the ultimate result, that chanting of the holy name must be the pure chanting of the holy name. And therefore, again, Krishna has created a system, a social system called varnashrama dharma, which is meant to facilitate our ability to chant the holy name, our ability to develop gradually this higher consciousness. Inevitably, very often, if not most of the time, I try to bring this aspect of our philosophy. Some years back, many years back, probably, my God, it might be like at least 15 years back, the GBC passed a resolution, some of you may not even know, whereby whenever someone gives a talk or a class, this was in the context of the Srimad Bhagavatam, they should take at least 10 minutes of that class to speak about varnashrama. Most speakers are not doing that, so I have to kind of make up for that. A little. So this verse that we read, spoken by Krishna, is speaking about how previously so many great sages, they took up this topic of transcendence, and which is of course directly connected with the practice of bhakti or devotional service, as Krishna explains at the very end of this chapter. And the more we associate with spirituality, transcendental activities, with the divine, actually Prabhupada translates varnashrama as divine culture. It's not something mundane. It becomes mundane when it is disconnected with Krishna. It becomes spiritual, spiritualized when connected with Krishna. We have a few minutes because normally it is good to give a few minutes at the end in case there are any either comments or questions on the topic we have discussed. And once again, this essay on Gita Nagari is available. If you're not aware of what is called the folio or the Veda base, it's on the, it can be downloaded. You can ask those who maybe have the folio, and you can get, you can probably download actually a copy of this essay of Gita Nagari. Any comments or questions? Yes, Mike is here, probably. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, so thanks so much that you enlightened about this varnashram dharma, because this 50% remain work Prabhupada left for this varnashram, and you encourage everyone. But this is a challenge in a town life. Means you said that we have some land or cows, then we can maintain the simple living and high thinking. This thing. But how it is possible in town life like Delhi, Bombay?
So very good question. Yes. Actually, the majority of people and the majority of our devotees should not be living where they're living, and should not be engaged in the type of occupation that they have. Now, this might seem like, well, that's easy enough to say, or even some may object that this is not very practical. But we should know, I mean, it is there, especially in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are prescribed duties, specific prescribed duties for householders. Of course, you're a brahmachari, but brahmacharis are supposed to know these things also. Because Narada Muni, when he instructs, Narada Muni, as a sage and sadhu and brahmachari, preaching to Yudhishthira, is talking in detail about varnashrama. And one of the important statements he makes is that the majority of householders, especially important for householders, majority of our householders are meant to make their living, are meant to actually be connected with agriculture. We need to understand, I mean, I won't get into this very much because the time is not there. Definitely, anywhere where one is practicing Krishna consciousness, one can make advancement. One can learn to apply the same ideology of simple living and high thinking. We should be simplifying our lives even in the cities and towns. But ultimately we should know that the ideal place and the ideal occupation, as recommended in the Shastra, is village life. It is, see, most of us don't know, especially, I would say, unfortunately, our householders. Most of our householders don't know what is the ideal way of making a living. We don't know what is the Vedic science of economics. We have not properly studied, or we have not properly heard, and Prabhupada often repeated this. The ideal and the standard science of economics is that verse we find in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishi Goraksha Vanijam Vaisha Karma Swabhavajam. That is meant to be the standard of economics. So the more we are caught up in city life, how we can apply this science? This is the natural, simple, and sustainable science of economics, recommended by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Prabhupada explains in one lecture, Krishna didn't go every day to the factory. Krishna went to the fields. He took the cows out. And there's a very powerful purport we were reading this morning when we went to the farm, how the going, Krishna's going with his cowherd friends, with the hundreds and thousands of calves. From a young age, Krishna is looking after the calves. Later on, he's promoted to looking after the cows. So Prabhupada explains this going of Krishna to the forest every day with the cows and the calves. This is Vedic education. For the vast majority of young boys, this is actually meant to be the education. So there's a lot more to be said in that respect, and that needs to be, as we say, unpacked, actually, because we just can't relate to that. How going to the land, to the forest with cows, how is that education? We may immediately, our mind will tell us. But actually, if we stop and listen to what is explained actually in the 10th canto, in those before and after this particular verse, I'll give you the reference. You can look at it anytime. Canto number 10, chapter 11, text 37 is the one I'm referring to. 10, 11, 37. Prabhupada explains how Vedic education for the vast majority of people, for the boys, and also for the adults, as I mentioned, is in connection. So it means that actually we have very greatly deviated from what is meant to be the norm. That's a whole big topic in itself, of course, but at least maybe this can be a little incentive for all of us, whether we are householders, brahmacharis, or whatever, to think about what is being conveyed to us both from the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And I'm looking at the clock. It's very difficult to miss the clock. Nice big clock. It's already 7 o'clock, so I will end here. And thank you all very much for being very attentive. Thank you. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna.